in our headlines at this hour. Germany says it is ready to support a ban on Russian oil, essentially paving the path to a phased-in embargo over the coming months by the European Union in response to the crisis in Ukraine. The South Korean ruling party has voted in favor of a final bill on prosecution reform at the National Assembly on this Tuesday, setting the stage to strip the prosecution of its investigative powers. And the Presidential Transition Committee has unveiled a list of 110 national tasks to be tackled by the Yoon administration upon its launch on May 10th. Hello and welcome. It's Tuesday afternoon, May 3rd here in Korea, and you're watching yet another edition of the Daily Report. We start on the local political front. The ruling Democratic Party earlier on this Tuesday morning passed the second and final bill on prosecution reform, essentially paving the path for the promulgation of the two bills that look to do away with the prosecution's power to investigate. I have Lee Kyung-won standing by at the National Assembly with details on that. Now, Kyung-won, I believe a formal declaration is imminent.
That's right. President Moon Jae-in convened a cabinet meeting at 2 p.m. where he is expected to promulgate two controversial prosecution bills. This comes after the revised Criminal Procedure Act passed the final vote just this morning, which along with others removes the prosecution's ability to use evidence in one case to get testimony for another case. Despite strong opposition from the People Power Party, the ruling Democratic Party, which holds the majority in parliament, pushed the bill through just 3 minutes after the plenary session kicked off. The other bill, aimed at gradually stripping away prosecution's power to investigate, was passed on Saturday, also led by the DP. The cabinet meeting is being held in the afternoon instead of the usual 10 a.m., which facilitated the DP's plan to complete the bill passage and promulgation on the same day on Tuesday. This will be President Moon's last cabinet meeting before he leaves office on May 9th. The bill, once approved by the cabinet, would take effect after a 4-month grace period.
Right. And Kyung-won, what has been the response essentially from the two parties following this latest event?
Well, the DP, which has been pushing for prosecution reform for years, said today marks a historic day. It also vows to set up a committee charged with setting up a special investigative body, which will take over the prosecution's power to investigate. But the PPP defined the passage as legislative dictatorship by the DP and condemned what it called an unlawful military-like operation driven by the DP's goal of completing it during Moon's term. Shortly after the plenary session, the party's lawmakers, including floor leader Kwon Song-dong, headed to the presidential Blue House to lodge a strong complaint over the bill, calling for President Moon to veto. The prosecution office also called for Moon to veto the bill. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Kyung-won, thank you for that report. That was our Lee Kyung-won reporting from the National Assembly. Also, on the local front, the Presidential Transition Committee says the management of state affairs under the Yoon administration will be dictated by common sense, fairness and practicality. On Tuesday, the chair of the committee, An Chol-soo, shared the specifics behind 6 national objectives based on 20 public pledges that will be addressed through 110 government tasks during the new administration's term in office. With regard to the country's economy, the incoming administration will let companies and citizens take the lead, with the government adopting a hands-off approach. President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol will be inaugurated next Tuesday. Meanwhile, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's nomination for Education Minister has announced his withdrawal from the post. The announcement by Kim In-chul on Tuesday morning comes just days ahead of his confirmation hearing. There had been allegations of ethical lapses as his children had secured Fulbright scholarships while he was an auditor for the Korea Fulbright Foundation. Now, members of the President-elect's party had reportedly called on Kim to surrender his post. Inflation here in South Korea soared in April to hit its highest level in well over a decade. Analysts say the surge is a reflection of escalating energy expenses worldwide. Our Jeong reports.
South Korea's consumer prices in April saw their biggest rise in more than 13 years. Statistics Korea said on Tuesday that its consumer price index last month stood at 106.85, a surge of 4.8% from a year ago. This is the biggest increase since October 2008 during the global financial crisis. The CPI has seen on-year rises of more than 3% for 5 straight months and has jumped more than 4% in each of the past 2 months. That's well above the government's inflation target of 2%. The statistics agency attributed the rise mostly to soaring commodity and energy prices.
The rise of 4.8% in April's consumer prices has been driven by the continued sharp rise in industrial goods, including petroleum goods and processed goods, as well as a rise in the price of services. Electricity, gas and water charges have also grown further.
Amid the soaring global oil prices, largely due to the war in Ukraine, consumers have seen higher prices at the pumps in April. On average, prices of petroleum products soared by more than 34% on year. To lessen the burden on drivers, the government extended the temporary fuel tax cut by a record 30%.
We've swiftly revised the law to ease the burden of high oil prices. The revisions were implemented on May 1st. We will do our best to cooperate with related industries so that the 30% tax cut can be quickly reflected in the prices.
Aside from fuel, consumers have seen high bills last month, with electricity prices rising by 11% and gas by nearly 3%. Major items on people's grocery shopping lists have also gotten more expensive, including imported beef up nearly 29% on year and chicken climbing by 17%. With rising food prices, many people who run restaurants are worried about their livelihoods.
I'm having a hard time because most food prices have gone up, some by as much as 80%. The situation is dragging on and it's been quite hard mentally. I'm really worried it'll never end.
The cost of dining out has increased by 6.6% on year, largest rise since April 1998. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Well, regardless of that reality, for now, large retail stores are stepping up sales campaigns to attract shoppers amid the recent ease in social restrictions. Our Choi Min-jung has more on those efforts.
Following South Korea's lifting of the outdoor mask mandate and the easing of social distancing rules, beauty and fashion industries are ramping up their promotions to lure more customers in. Starting Wednesday until the end of this week, Shinsegae Department Store is handing out 7% discount coupons to customers who have spent a certain amount. They can also receive coupons that offer up to 10% discounts when making a purchase through their mobile application. Luxury cosmetics chain Shikor is also offering 30% discounts on more than 30 brands starting this Friday. And with more people going outside, online fashion platform W Concept has offered up to 82% discount on swimwear and camping goods. Things are already looking better at large supermarkets. According to Lotte Mart on Tuesday, sales for last week increased by 7% compared to the previous week, thanks to food samples once again being available to customers. Authorities on Monday last week allowed large supermarkets to offer food samples for the first time in more than a year. Over the week, sales for bibimbyeon, a spicy cold noodle dish, increased the most by a whopping 70%. Sales for imported meat increased by 40%, frozen dumplings by 30%, and fruit by 25%. Lotte Mart says allowing people to taste the product plays an important role when it comes to making purchasing decisions, which ultimately affects sales. That being said, supermarkets are hoping to see sales continue to increase, with people given more opportunities to try out new products. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
In other news, the ratio of female recruits at South Korea's small and medium-sized enterprises was slightly higher than that at the country's conglomerates in the year 2021. According to data released by the Korea Small Business Institute, about 44% of those who were newly employed last year by SMEs with fewer than 300 staff were women, compared to around 33% of new employees at conglomerates. Nevertheless, the ratio of female employees rose faster at large conglomerates than at SMEs. SK Broadband and Netflix are embroiled in a lawsuit. The Korean internet service provider is calling for network usage fees from the American content provider, given the dramatic escalation in internet traffic in light of the latter's popularity here on the local front. For more, I have Dr. Rosalind Layton at the Aalborg University live on the line. Dr. Layton, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Dr. Layton, can you hear me? Right, Dr. Layton, let's begin then with a few words.
Oh.
Right, do you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Is it okay?
Yes. Dr. Layton,
Sorry
let's
about
begin.
that.
That's completely fine. Let's begin with a few words then on the dispute between SK Broadband and Netflix.
Yes, well, there's no doubt that the whole world is watching South Korea presently to see how this litigation is going to play out. Remember, Netflix accounts for 7% of all the traffic in South Korea. It's a staggering number. And if you look at South Korea's broadband customers, there's about 23 million, but only 5 million subscribe to Netflix. SK Broadband experienced in a very short period of time that the traffic from Netflix increased by an order of 24 times over. SK Broadband had to invest a lot of money to facilitate this traffic and went back to Netflix and said, how can we recover these costs? They didn't want to raise the prices on all the end users because not all of them subscribe. But at any rate, Netflix did not, as they said, we don't have to negotiate with you. You have to deliver our content for free. And Netflix brought SK Broadband to court. So the case has already had the first round. It ruled in SK Broadband's favor. And now the next step is underway.
Right. So as you mentioned, last June, the Seoul Central District Court that has ruled in favor of SK Broadband, and Netflix in response has since appealed the case to the Seoul High Court. That being said, Dr. Layton, I understand Netflix has proposed an alternative solution.
Yes, indeed. Netflix would like to provide copies of its content in these big servers and put them inside SK Broadband's network. Now, the problem with that is that those are big servers, they take up a lot of space, and they can only be used for Netflix content. So SK Broadband can't use that capacity for any other content. It can't use it during the rest of the day. So it's not a great solution. On top of that, the Netflix technology works that it expands. It finds the available capacity in the network and expands and grows based upon what's there. So this is actually a costly solution for SK Broadband. It's not ideal given that all the other content that it has to deliver. So this is really what the court is going to look at. SK Broadband would like simply to work out a payment arrangement with Netflix, similar to cloud providers or any other kind of a content arrangement. So whereas Netflix simply says, look, you're obligated to deliver our traffic for free. Remember, Netflix got started as a DVD by mail company. They used to pay the postal service, to deliver their content. When they went to the internet, they sort of said, well, gee, we don't have postage anymore. But if we want to have the investment in networks, we have to find, policymakers have to find a way to resolve these, to make sure that the cost of running the network are recovered.
Right. And while we wait for this decision by the court itself, then, Dr. Layton, where do you stand with regard to this ongoing legal battle between these two private companies?
Yes, well, this needn't be a dispute because we have all over the world for more than centuries now two-sided markets. There are economic models to resolve what's going on. Anybody who's ever used a credit card or a newspaper experiences this. SK Broadband is a two-sided market, has a platform. It serves on the one hand, it builds the network to end users, it runs the customer accounts, and on the other side, it's working with content providers like Netflix or Facebook or Naver or what have you, and offering them delivery and storage, security, computing, and a different set of services. So what Netflix wants is for all of the network costs to be borne by the end user while they pay zero. Now, that is called free riding. And if you have that situation, the network will be degraded. In order for the networks to continue to invest and innovate, you have to collect payments from both sides of the market. And obviously, they're for different services and different things. But this ensures the best outcome for everybody.
Right. Dr. Layton, how have disputes between internet service providers and content providers been settled elsewhere that's beyond South Korea?
Absolutely. Well, this is certainly not the first time this has emerged. A lot of governments around the world are imposing taxes on Netflix. They're imposing regulatory requirements. They are wanting to regulate Netflix like a broadcaster, for example. It needn't be that way. I mean, we have technology today to enable a fair cost sharing. If you look at cloud business models, you set up a payment in advance based upon the amount of traffic that you bring into the network. And certainly South Korea is on the forefront because its government and parliament has figured out that we need to, if a company like Netflix refuses to negotiate, if it abuses its market power, then the government needs to find a way to recover the costs so that the networks can invest and ensure that they can deliver the content for everyone.
Dr. Layton, pundits say a final ruling on the case between SK Broadband and Netflix looks to have extensive implications. What are your thoughts, very briefly speaking?
Yes, well, there's no doubt the world is watching this case. It is a David and Goliath case. You have a little broadband provider like SK, which is standing up to a global giant, Netflix, the David, if you will, and I'm sorry, the Goliath in this story. So it will have global implications because of where you've seen the Korean policymakers really come together to understand that if you want to have a broadband ecosystem, if you want an internet ecosystem, that the different parties have to be able to recover their costs. The business models have to work for the different actors in the ecosystem. So obviously the world is hoping that South Korea will provide a solution, that the court will prevail to be able to find fair cost recovery model, and that the networks will continue to be top. South Korea is recognized as the world's #1 broadband model, and that really reflects that policymakers have been on the forefront of solving these disputes.
Right. All right, Dr. Layton, thank you very much for making the time to join us live at this hour with your thoughts.
Thank you.
Germany is ready for new sanctions against Russia, including an oil embargo. That is according to country's top officials. Our Kim Yo-san has more.
In a major shift in its stance, Germany says it's prepared to support an EU-wide embargo on Russian oil. To this end, the country's foreign minister said in a televised interview Monday that Berlin is making preparations. The comments come a day after Germany's economy and climate minister explained that he expects his country to be fully independent of Russian crude oil imports by the end of summer. Meanwhile, the EU's energy policy chief says that paying in rubles for Russian oil as requested by Moscow would breach the bloc's sanctions.
Paying in rubles through the conversion mechanism managed by the Russian public authorities and a second dedicated account in Gazprom Bank is a violation of the sanctions and cannot be accepted.
The 27-member bloc further explained that there is no immediate risk to the region's supply security, with deliveries to Poland and Bulgaria continuing via alternative routes from Greece and Germany. The news comes as a Ukrainian commander at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol confirmed with CNN that a large plume of smoke is coming from the facility, where thousands of people have been sheltering for weeks. The soldier, however, would not provide details on which part of the plant was hit, noting they do not want the Russians to correct their aim. The video was first posted on Telegram by a pro-Russian channel on Monday evening local time. In related news, the U.S. believes that the Russian military's chief of the general staff visited Ukraine's Donbas region last week. But a U.S. defense official explains that Washington cannot confirm media reports that he was wounded while fighting there. The Pentagon official said that the Russians have made only, quote, minimal gains in Donbas over the past days. The official also added that Moscow has launched over 2,100 missiles at Ukrainian targets since the onset of its invasion, saying that the U.S. has sent over 5,000 Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine so far. The official further explained that the assistance does not impact on Washington's defense readiness condition. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, there have been some unsettling forecasts with regard to North Korea's nuclear ambitions in recent days. One pundit believes the regime is looking to reduce the size of its nuclear warheads. Our Peonji tells us why.
Former IAEA Deputy Director Olli Heinonen says he is sure North Korea is trying to miniaturize its nuclear weapons and that it will need to do additional tests, at least 2, possibly 3. He said the North has 2 types of nuclear weapons, one made using plutonium and another that utilizes uranium. He added the regime probably wants to make both of them smaller. As for the reason the North is trying to decrease the size of the weapons, he said it's because Kim Jong-un wants to have intercontinental ballistic missiles that can carry several nuclear warheads. The former IAEA official's remarks come a day after Washington-based think tank 38 North said that Tunnel 3 at Punggye-ri nuclear facility is estimated to be capable of containing explosions of up to 120 kilotons. However, it said the North is incapable of containing explosions the size of the nuclear test it conducted in 2017. In May 2018, North Korea blew up the Punggye-ri nuclear test site comprised of 4 separate tunnel systems. But recent satellite images show that it has started to repair tunnel number 3 at the dismantled test site. Regarding the restoration of the tunnel, Voice of America News reported Tuesday that the U.S. State Department criticized the North for its missile programs. The U.S. government said the regime's unlawful weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missiles constitute a threat to international peace and security. It also said the U.S. has called on North Korea to engage in dialogue, but the North has not responded. 배은지, Arirang News.
To enlist or not to enlist? That is the latest heated debate here in South Korea over mandatory military service for members of K-pop sensation BTS. Now, in this segment of Viewpoint, we bring you the thoughts of foreign journalists on this matter. I have Andres Sanchez-Brand from EFE Spain here in the studio. Andres, it's good to have you back.
Thanks for having us here, Sunny.
I also have Sébastien Felletti from Le Figaro. Sébastien, welcome back.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Right, and joining the session virtually is Jotam Confino, journalist at Haaretz and TV2 Denmark. Jotam, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
My pleasure.
Right, Andres, let's begin with you then. Your personal thoughts, please, on the debate, ongoing debate that is, with regard to mandatory military service for BTS here in South Korea.
Well, I mean, for artists like BTS to, be forced to put their career on hold for 18 to 21 months, that's a lot of time without rehearsing, producing, composing. So, it's totally understanding their concern and the fans' concern and, South Korea's concern, given how important they are for the local economy. But on the other hand, I think there's also a legitimate concern for people that are not artists and are worried about what the broadening of these exemptions might bring, and the problem with them being deemed not important enough for their contributions to society, not important enough to be exempted from military service. I think this is probably the perfect moment for Korea maybe to open the door and debate maybe if there's maybe this is the good time to privatize, to professionalize, the army, right?
Right. And Sébastien, where do you stand on this particular debate? Do you believe that members of BTS should be exempt from compulsory conscription given their role in enhancing Korea's cultural standing?
Well, of course, as a foreign national, I have absolutely no right to give any advice on this very sensitive issue. But there's no question, and if we look back we know that some other people in Korea can be exempted, like some athletes, some musical classic musicians. So there's no question that what BTS brings to South Korea is on par with some of those athletes. I mean, BTS has put Korea on the map. They won so many charts. So there's no question about that. The question is more about fairness. Of course, Korea is a country obsessed with ranking. So it's easy when you have a gold medal or when you have a clear set of rules to say, okay, if you reach the gold medal, you're going to be exempted. When it comes to artists, it's a different story. That's where there is a debate. But I think it's very important, as Andres said, it's the right time to have a debate about this, because this issue, it might sound a bit of a light issue, but it's actually touching upon very sensitive issue, because we know how South Korea society is attached to fairness. We've seen in the past few years, that sometime when someone got access to some university for a reason that seems to be unfair, it triggered massive political scandal. So this society needs fairness. We'll look at this in a very close way. So it's important that there's a discussion at the National Assembly, in society, and say that is there a reason for these people to be exempted despite their success? We shouldn't be naive about this, because the truth is also these people are making huge amount of money. And what is at stake is actually millions or billions of dollars for those young people. So it's not just an issue about artists. Behind there's some money, vested interest. So the question is also, if they're exempted, is there also a way for them to contribute to society? And if you exempt them, how do you make sure that there's no free riding in the future? So this is actually a very interesting discussion, and it's worth being on the political radar. And on the debate in this country, I think.
Right, of course. Meanwhile, Jotam, you are Danish-Israeli by birth, and I believe your father was a veteran Israeli soldier. What are your thoughts on this ongoing dispute over military service for BTS here in South Korea?
I think I would agree with Andres that as a foreigner, I don't want to go into the debate really with my own personal opinion. In this particular case, it's the pop singers in South Korea. I would say, however, that first of all, debate is crucial in any democracy for any change. That's number one. And number two, I think each country in the world should have its own rules, because not all countries have military threats at their borders. South Korea is one of them. So obviously, you should have different rules than, let's say, Denmark, because Denmark isn't really in a state of war with anyone. Denmark is also part of NATO, which means that it will be protected by NATO if someone attacks it. And also, it doesn't have a nuclear power, a hostile nuclear power right in its backyard. So it makes complete sense that there are completely different rules for each democracy in the world. And I think that it's very healthy when South Korea, when you're debating this, that you have principles that you lay the foundation on debate upon. Is it a money question? Is it a matter of whether you contribute enough to society? What is actually the starting point for the debate? Because I heard Andres say something about, yes, they bring in a lot of money, which means that they pay a lot of taxes. And in that way, they make the wheels go round in society in South Korea. That's a great point. But the starting point should really be, which principle are we even discussing the military draft laws on?
Right, valid points, of course. Andres, I believe conscription was abolished in Spain back in the year 2001. Can you tell us a bit about the background behind the decision to rid off mandatory military service in Spain after 230 years, is it?
Yes, and actually, you know, Spain and South Korea share the fact that they were, back in the day, both, had military governments. And mandatory military service was something that all men had in common while they were growing up. It was even, a rite of passage of sorts. But I think actually Jotam pointed something very interesting in that sense. With the turn of the century, what had happened in Spain was, the country had recovered democracy 23 years earlier. It had joined NATO. It had joined the European Union. So up until that point, those last 23 years had meant basically peace and prosperity for Spain. And we also have the fall of the Eastern Bloc. So by the year 2001, basically Spaniards saw basically saw no enemies. There was no talk like there used to be back in the day of, you know, enemies of the homeland, communists trying to invade and destroy your country. The enemy was gone. So by the year 2001, we're talking about, you know, the days of the Fukuyama's end of history. Basically, the Spanish people saw no need to keep mandatory service, and you know, eventually it was abolished, and we went for a professional army.
Right,
and that's
I see.
how it still is.
And in France, Sebastian, after almost 2 decades since phasing out conscription for men, the country's teenagers, back in the year 2019, I believe, took part in a pilot program as part of President Emmanuel Macron's pledge to reintroduce a form of civic service that would offer the young a taste of military life. What has been the response to that?
Well, absolutely. That's been one of the key promises of the then candidate Emmanuel Macron in 2017 when he first won the presidency. And it was interesting because more than 2 decades after, France went for a professional military service, professional army, sorry, and canceled the military service. That was back in '95 when, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, France felt that there was no need for military service, but we need a professional army to be able to project your troops far beyond Europe. So that was 20 years later. Macron is realizing the value also having a military service. What is this value? He says it's the need for young people, for any class, any origin, to get together at least for a short period of time to learn more about the so-called value of the French Republic. So what is at this stage, this is a program that is building up. Last year, 18,000 young French people between 15 and 17, like teenagers, spend 10 days together. But the idea is by 26, it will become a compulsory program where basically for 1 month, teenagers will have to spend 1 month together and learn. They have to wake up early in the morning, they have to salute the flag, they have to learn about French Republic values. And if they want to keep on, they could potentially do a longer period of service in NGOs or in public services, and they can also learn about defense if they want. They can work in the police, in the military. So this is basically an attempt by the government, the realization that military service add a value in terms of a cohesive value where you can glue the society, and that's really important. The moment in France where there's increasing sense of inequality or diversity within society. There's also a lot of migrants in France, people of foreign origin, and the idea of the military service like this is to bring all these people together so they can still have something in common. So it's remains to be seen whether they can keep it as planned and make it compulsory. That's the big question for the second mandate of President Macron we just started.
Right. And Joe Tom, do share with us a bit about the compulsory military service over there in Israel.
Yes, so in Israel, everyone has to go to the army at the age of 18. Men go for 32 months and women go for 24 months. And it has been like this since the establishment of the state, really. The military is the backbone of the country, and it has been like that from the beginning, from 1948, because Israel has been in a state of war with the surrounding states for decades. They eventually made peace with Egypt and with Jordan, but at the moment, they are still in a state of war with Syria. There is Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, considered a terrorist organization by most countries, in Lebanon. That is a direct threat to Israel. You have Hamas and Islamic Jihad, two Palestinian, also considered terrorist organizations in Gaza that are from time to time firing rockets at Israel. And you have many other countries such as Iran, Iraq, that are very hostile towards Israel. So it is the backbone here, which is why everyone has to go to the army. That being said, there's a lot of debate also about the exemptions in Israel, because there's always an exemption to a rule, of course. And in this case, it's religious Jews, Orthodox Jews. They get to basically not go to the army if they don't want to. And they are in hundreds of thousands here at this point. They weren't in the beginning of the state of Israel when it was established. But today, hundreds of thousands of Orthodox Jews get to go free from the army. And this is basically a law that was passed by the Israeli government decades ago to give some sort of freeway, some exemption to this particular segment in society. Today, it is widely discussed, and a lot of people are angry about it. Why aren't they going to the army? Why do they get to not go for 32 months into the army? So it's a huge debate, a little bit like the one you have in South Korea, only it's not pop bands, but religious people that are the ones being exempted. So a huge debate going on here in Israel.
Right. And Andres, in recent days, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has renewed interest in national defense capabilities. That being said, what are the chances of Spain perhaps reinstating a form of military service for men in the future?
Well, as of now, I think that's highly unlikely. But, you know, the Ukraine war could take any turn. We never know. But of course, that said, you know, countries like Spain or Portugal or even France, you know, we stand at the western side of Europe, and in that sense, we feel that the threat to our territorial integrity is not as compromised as other countries in the East, which actually have kept their military services. Like I can think of Greece. Ukraine actually recovered the mandatory military service after the invasion of the Donbas area in 2014. But what can actually also happen is what has happened in countries like Sweden, which actually had to restart the mandatory military service because they were actually running out of professional soldiers. The armed forces found no way to engage people into the military, and they had to reinstate the mandatory military service. Is that a problem happening now in Spain? I don't believe so. Right now, the troops are numbering around 80,000, and the government deems that is necessary as far as it goes to defending the national territory. But as you said, there's a war going out in Ukraine, and you never know what could happen in the next few years.
Right, we don't. Sebastian, let's go back to the debate on BTS then. What alternative service do you suppose could members of BTS engage in instead of the military then?
Well, I think there's also some, creative way where you can find we can find a middle ground here, because people are talking here about either exemption or going to the fully fledged military service. But if we look in the past in other countries, there's a lot of pop stars who were enrolled in the military service in other countries. Even back in the US, you had Elvis Presley, he had to do his duty. In France also, we had some famous pop star who had to do military service. But you know what happened? It was a great PR operation for the military. You bring them on, but you give them, they don't necessarily do the hard work, but they show up to see the troops, they cheer up the people. I mean, there are also ways where you could have a band like BTS contributing without necessarily doing the service that other Koreans do. I mean, it's open. The other alternative is to do some work for the community through NGOs or through some public services. I think there's ways where you could find a compromise so they will show that they are doing something for society without necessarily putting on hold their career. So the question is also whether the society here in South Korea is ready to accept this kind of creative solution, or whether we're going to stick to one-size-fits-for-all approach where basically there's no flexibility.
Right, it's an ongoing debate, so we'll have to wait and see probably. All right, Sebastian, thank you very much for your thoughts. Andres, thank you for your thoughts and your time. And Joe Tam over in Israel, thank you very much for joining us live at this hour.
My pleasure.
A total of 26,000 people will tour the Blue House on its first day open to the public. The Presidential Transition Committee says that this is 1 out of 3.5 applicants from close to 91,000 people who applied for the first tour, which takes place on the 10th of May. On day 1, the Blue House will be open to the public from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. But starting May 11th, it will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. with up to 39,000 people to be welcomed each day. Given this public opening of the presidential headquarters, President-elect Yoon, for his part, will move his executive office to the Defense Ministry compound. For parents in search of fun activities for their toddlers on this week's Children's Day, Dongdaemun Design Plaza in Seoul's Central Jonggu District could be worth a visit. Now, celebrating the 100th anniversary of Children's Day, the DDP Design Amusement Park, the plaza's first face-to-face outdoor event in 2 years, will take place from May 5th to the 15th. Now, Korean pop artist Im Jin Bin's giant pink balloon, that is, welcomes kids and movies for both kids and adults, including Sing 2 and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them will be screened outside for free. And Korea has a new theme park in town. Legoland Korea will welcome family, friends and fans starting Children's Day, which falls on Thursday this week. Arirang's Kim Bo-kyung has a preview.
Just in time for the spring, the highly anticipated global amusement park has finally been built. The 10th of its kind in the world and first global theme park in the country, Legoland Korea officially opens on Children's Day. It has over 40 rides in 7 zones, covering an area of 280,000 square meters. Visitors during the trial opening period were excited to bring their kids to the theme park.
My kid loves Lego. He has been staying indoors, but is now playing outside and also seeing Lego on a much bigger size. He's very excited, and I'm very satisfied.
The head of the resort says the theme park is a different experience compared to other resorts around the world as it is situated on an island.
So Legoland Korea Resort is a truly phenomenal destination. It is the first time that we are truly built on an island here in Gangwon Province in Chuncheon. We're very, very excited to be surrounded by the water and the mountains. To me, my favorite ride is the observation tower, so the Legoland lookout. You can see this whole region and the mountains, the water surrounding the island. It's absolutely beautiful.
Another unique feature is the Miniland at the heart of the park, where visitors can see Korean landmarks made out of Lego.
Here at Miniland, 8 major South Korean landmarks, including Gyeongbokgung Palace and the National Assembly, have been reproduced with Lego bricks. Around 100 Lego masters took 3 months to make these, using over 7 million bricks.
With the global amusement park now in town, Chuncheon residents are anticipating a boost to regional tourism and the economy. Currently, Legoland Korea is expecting 2 million visitors a year and could bring around 9,000 new jobs and $465 million to the economy per year. Yet an expert says efforts should be made to make sure it properly boosts the regional economy.
Disneyland in Hong Kong is on the outskirts of town. The city prepared travel packages for people to visit both the downtown and the amusement park through a well-developed traffic system. Chuncheon City too needs to think about such matters. Recently, the traveling trend is to go to a site where one can enjoy its regional locality. Chuncheon has lots of such sites, including Nami Island and Myeongdong Dakgalbi Alley, so the city should connect such sites.
Residents are hoping Legoland Korea could contribute to the local economy while giving kids a wonderful time. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Chuncheon.
On the rural front, training has been set up for local farmers interested in taking advantage of technology for their trade. Our Yoon explains.
This large greenhouse houses deliciously ripe strawberries. Considering its large area, there's only one farmer at work. And instead of the usual farming tools, it looks like the farmer is busy on their phone. With just the touch on a smartphone, the smart farm installation sense changes in the environment both inside and outside, then automatically opens or closes the windows. Supplying nutrition to the crops inside these smart farms can also be done automatically or remotely. These functions allow farmers to respond to sudden changes in weather easily and quickly, which increases efficiency and convenience. These smart farms have shown to be 30% more productive than traditional farms, and these farms produce higher proportions of better quality foods.
When there is sudden rain or strong wind or a rise in temperature, farmers get notifications on their phones so we can respond quickly, remotely.
Now there are training centers to make the smart farms and their benefits more widespread. There are more than 100 locations where farmers can learn about and experience the technology behind these smart farms. Around 1,250 farms nationwide have turned smart following the training, and their average income is reported to have increased by an average of 21%.
In order to run a successful smart farm, farmers need sufficient training and practice with the technology.
The farming and agriculture industry in South Korea has been experiencing a labor reduction due to an aging farming population, which makes the spread of this smart farm technology even more necessary. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the US, a wildfire that started almost a month ago continues to sweep across the southwest of the country. Thousands of residents in the state of New Mexico evacuated their homes on Sunday to escape an advancing wildfire. The blaze, which started on April 6th, has destroyed hundreds of homes and led to residents abandoning settlements in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Winds of up to 64 kilometers per hour have blown embers up to a mile away, starting new blazes that have since merged together. Satellite imagery shows that as of Sunday, almost 104,000 acres of land have been burned. According to officials, over 1,100 firefighters have been deployed to contain the blaze, as experts predict that the fire could potentially double in size. So far, no deaths or injuries have been reported. Israel on Monday criticized Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov for claiming that Adolf Hitler had Jewish roots. Lavrov made the statement on Italian television on Sunday, responding to a question asking why Russia said it needed to, quote, denazify Ukraine, as Volodymyr Zelensky, the country's president, is Jewish himself. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has since summoned the Russian ambassador and demanded an apology, adding that the statement trivializes the horrors of the Holocaust. UEFA has banned Russian teams from upcoming competitions, including the Women's European Championship in July and qualifying matches for next year's Women's World Cup. According to a statement on Monday by Europe's football governing body, the decision follows Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Portugal will take Russia's place in Group C at the Women's Euros. UEFA also cast out Russia's bid to host the Men's European Championship in 2028 and 2032. That means just the bid from the UK and Ireland and the bid from Turkey are still in the running to host Euro 2028. Russian clubs are also banned from competing in the UEFA Champions League, Europa League or Europa Conference League next season. In an effort to set up the world's highest meteorological monitoring station, Chinese scientists will climb to an altitude of 8,800 meters. And if successful, the new station located on Mount Chomolungma on the China-Nepal border will claim the title from another station in the area that sits at an altitude of 8,430 meters. Project engineers are currently waiting for the optimal weather conditions to begin their climb. The team has already set up 3 other stations at heights between 7,000 to 8,300 meters and are also planning to install a glacier radar to measure the thickness of snow and ice at the mountain's summit. The Italian Alps were lit up by 29 light installations on Sunday as part of a light festival in Bressanone. Titled Water is Life and Light is Art, this year's water-themed festival marked the 4th time it's been hosted by the city and saw different works of art connected by a 3.2-kilometer-long blue line, creating an art trail through the old town. With pieces dedicated to topics from global warming to space photography, the Light Festival is slated to continue until May 22nd. However, a change is scheduled in the festival's theme, with light to become the focus on May 16th to coincide with the United Nations International Day of Light. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Tuesday afternoon. I hope you enjoyed your first and second day without masks outdoors.
Everything looks good to go outside, so make the most of it. But in the evening, you might feel a chill, so please be mindful of big gaps, nearly 20 degrees in some regions. Afternoon temperatures will continue to rise over the next few days, and it's beginning to feel like summer is around the corner in Daegu and Gyeongju. Just don't forget to put on your sunscreen to enjoy outdoor activities. And the main issue for today is preliminary strong wind alert, confined to the east coast, and those areas will be affected by strong gusts from a westerly wind blowing at up to 25 meters per second. And we do have a dry weather advisory in the same regions, so be mindful that conditions are suitable for fires to break out. It's going to be sunny until the day after tomorrow, and another round of spring showers are in the forecast on Friday and Saturday. Afterwards, it's going to cool down a bit. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
And that is all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Report, but do stay tuned to Arirang News for more headlines.